Welcome you all for CHD 203, Chapter 3, Literacy Assessment. And remember, if you look in your textbook, and I encourage you to get your textbook and follow along, that we say assessment must promote learning, not just measure it. And remember, one of the key things about assessment is assessment should drive our instruction. We should not just be assessing to assess, we ought to be assessing in order to drive the instruction, meeting the needs of the children. Assessment is a process of gathering information on student performance for instructional decision making, hence guiding our instruction. Assessment involves the evaluation of children's achievement through observation and conferencing to provide feedback and set learning goals. Young children need constant guidance and support from teachers, parents, and peers through collaboration, conversation, and conferencing to accomplish their literacy goals. Through systematic assessment, which means a frequent pre-planned assessment cycle, teachers help children to be aware of their own literacy skills, learning goals, and areas for improvement. Documentation of children's work is collected over time to show progress in a variety of literacy areas. And remember, we call that a portfolio assessment, where we're gathering those samples of children's work. Children need guidance and scaffolding, which means that you're connecting prior learning to new learning to become independent and strategic readers and writers. Teachers are role models for literacy enthusiasm, reading and writing strategies, self-awareness, and self-assessment. So let's get started with Chapter 3. So if you're following along with me, you need to be on page 48 of your textbook. And let's talk about the concepts of assessment. So of course, assessment is an integral part of teaching and learning, okay? And we know that our teaching should be based on developmentally appropriate practices, so therefore our assessment should be as well. And developmentally appropriate practices involves understanding of child development, the specific needs and strengths of each child, and the cultural context in which the child lives. So developmentally appropriate assessment practices require an understanding of child development, specific needs and strengths of those of individual children, as well as the cultural context in which the children live. And teachers will design curriculum and assessment that is responsive to developmentally appropriate practices. Now, remember, I told you early on about Marie Clay, and remember, she is the lady who came up with and coined the term early literacy and emergent literacy, okay? So she developed an assessment that's called the Observation Survey of Early Literacy Achievement. And it was a collection of emergent literacy informal assessments such as alphabetic knowledge, concepts of print, running records, and sight words. And so we're going to talk a little bit about all of those areas. Recognizing words, sentences, and spacing within a text and using picture clues, punctuation, and return sweep. There's that word. And remember, what return sweep is how one line of text connects into the next one. Support the development of concepts of print. Sight words are high frequency words in beginning reading, such as the words the, and, a, when, and why. There are over 300 of these function words that appear in all beginning reading text. The purpose of assessing concepts of print, miscues, and reading behaviors is to understand a child's reading process and to make instructional decisions. So now let's talk a little bit about the interactive assessment cycle. On page 50, you have a figure 3.2 at the top, and it shows you the interactive assessment cycle. And that it follows 5 processes, a 5-step process to be the most effective. And you see those 5 steps: formal assessment, informal assessment, observation, self-assessment, and interaction. And they're working together in that circle, okay? Informal assessment of current knowledge and skills. So that's what we're talking about when we're informal. Observation, the teacher observing the student. Self-assessment done by the student. Teacher, student, peer interaction, which is also scaffolding, where we're connecting prior knowledge to new learning. And then formal assessment, which addresses a child's literacy strengths and needs. And here's what we know, that both formal and informal assessment tools are necessary to fully measure a student's literacy development over time. So we need both. And remember, we talked about that. We said that they are both serve a purpose in the early childhood classroom. So what exactly is informal assessment? Okay, so remember we said it is an integral part and it occurs during that early literacy development, and that in order for this to happen, children need to be stimulated using all 5 of their senses to enhance their learning. So we're talking about observation, we're talking about kid watching per se, which is probably one of the oldest forms of assessment, is actually observation. Okay, now remember, those are types of informal assessments. We talked in detail about formal assessments during class, and those were those normed reference ones. Remember, where that compares one group of students to another group of students in the country who take the same test. Okay, those are formal assessments, and they're typically norm referenced, meaning what I just said, students in one state take them, and then they're compared to how students do in other states. Okay, so let's talk about assessment criteria. And when we talk about criteria, assessment has to be authentic, okay? So authentic assessment is ongoing, it's varied, and it focuses on the strengths of each child. And that is what makes an authentic assessment, okay? Continuous and ongoing. We just don't do it one time. We're going to assess them, find out their strengths and weaknesses, teach to those, and then assess again and see if our instruction actually worked. Okay, we're going to focus on their strengths to accelerate them through the learning process and the literacy process. Okay, and it doesn't just need to be one type of assessment. Okay, we need kind of multi-layered assessments so that we can base their performance based, and we can see if they're also developmentally appropriate and show us kind of a holistic view of the child's literacy performance. Okay. We're going to talk at great length about miscues, okay, or running records. And I'm going to take time actually in class to show you about that. But a running record is just simply a quick assessment of a child's oral reading. Okay, Marie Clay, she designed this to be administered frequently. You can do that, and quickly. They're kind of on the spot, okay, on the run. You basically give a child a text and you mark down, do they say the right words or do they say the wrong words? And if they say the wrong words, what did they say? What word did they read instead of the word that was correct? Okay. And then you analyze those results and you can decide, is it that the child doesn't know beginning sounds? Do they not know vowels? Maybe they don't know endings? So we can actually use their real reading in time, right there on the run, to see where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are, or what's preventing them to moving to the next level in reading. Okay, and that's called a running record and a miscue analysis. And that's exactly what, when you don't say the right word, that is a miscue. Okay, and so we're just looking at those miscues to see what did they do. If you look on page 58 of your textbook, you'll actually see a running record and then miscue kind of sheet that was done on a child on this story called I Can See. And you will see how they put check marks over each word. That means that the child read those words correctly. So on page 4, the child read, I can see a green frog. And they read every word correctly. But look on page 8. There's actually a word written over the word tree. Do you see that? So what that says to me is that the child said, I can see a brown. And then when they got to the word tree, they did not say tree, but they said the word what? Bug. You're exactly right, because that's what the teacher wrote down. Okay. Then look on page 10. Same thing happened again. I can see a, and instead of saying black, they said the word blue. And then they read the word bird correctly. Now look on page 12. I can see a, they read correctly. And then the word yellow is circled. And what that means is they didn't say anything. Like they had no strategy. They had no way of understanding what that word yellow was. Okay. They didn't know. And so probably the teacher just told the word. Okay. When the child just paused and had their finger under the word yellow for a while, couple seconds, the teacher just said yellow, and then what happened? They said the word sun. Okay. So that's how a miscue analysis works, okay, or running record. And so when we do one in class, we're going to talk about that, but and how we as teachers could use this to help guide our instruction. Okay. Another assessment to determine a child's reading level is called an informal reading inventory, okay, or an IRI. And an IRI determines their reading level, what kind of strategies they use to help them figure out unknown words, what their strengths are, and what their needs are. Okay, so it's very different than a running record where all we're looking at is their miscues. Okay, for informal, an informal reading inventory, we're determining their reading level, the strategies they use to attack unknown words, their strengths, and their needs. Okay. And we'll talk more about that over time as well. On page 60, there is a section about portfolio assessments. And we know what portfolios are. Portfolios are a collection of student work. And they're often used in both formal and informal assessments and can document a child's learning over time for a variety of tasks. There are actually 5 components of portfolio development that guide assessment and provide rationale and purpose for that kind of approach. And they are celebration. So while you're collecting those works, you're actually acknowledging and valuing a child's accomplishments. Cognition, it encourages self-reflection and self-assessment. So when you talk about it with the child, they can actually reflect on their work. Communication, we use their collected work samples to inform parents, teachers, and administrators of a child's growth and development over time. Cooperation, to organize and promote understanding of collective group work. And then competency, compare the child's performance with others based on a rubric or a set of conditions that we use by looking at that work in the portfolio. Okay. Now, on page 65, there is a section that is entitled Assessment of Early Literacy Skills. Now, back to our favorite lady, Marie Clay. And remember I told you she had an assessment inventory that was called an observation survey of early literacy achievement. And it is a very effective tool for assessing beginning readers. And she has subtests within that inventory and that are observable tasks. Okay. Number 1 is a running record, which I explained to you earlier. Letter identification. It just simply shows them the uppercase letters and the lowercase letters and see if they can respond with the name of the letter, the sound, or a word that begins with that letter. Okay, so it's not just seeing A and saying A. If they said then you would count them. If they said apple, then you would count it because you know that they understand it, okay? Writing vocabulary task and word test. And during this, the student is asked to write as many words as they can in 10 minutes. And proper names also count, okay? So, and each word counts as 1 point. So what we're looking is to see if they can actually write the words from memory, or are they looking around the room and actually copying words in the classroom, okay? So we're looking to see if they can actually write, how many words they can write in 10 minutes. The fourth piece is hearing and recording sounds and words, and it's kind of a dictation test, okay? The teacher reads a sentence for the child to write during the hearing and recording sounds piece, okay? So if you look on page 65 at that figure 3.7, you'll see I have a big dog at home. And so the teacher would say the sentence and the child would actually write it down. And you're looking to see how many sounds do they actually, from the sounds that they hear, can they get down on paper? And then, of course, concepts about print. We've talked about that immensely. And there's actually a script that corresponds with one of her books that's called Sandstones or Follow Me Moon. And those are some books that you can use to actually assess concepts of print or print awareness. And the questions that you ask them progress from easy to more difficult, including, do you read the book from left to right, top to bottom, those types of things, okay? Sorry for my phone ringing. On page 67, we're talking about literacy assessment and strategies. And the literacy process involves intuition, imagination, problem solving, and critical thinking skills. And teachers have to establish a stimulating learning environment so that all children can expand those areas, okay? So that's concludes us for chapter 3. And if you printed off your quiz and followed along with this, then you should make a 100. Okay, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time, okay?